Friday.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Here we are.
Oh, here we Friday.
So we're back with Sanjeev and Nicole, and we're gonna just enlighten you a little bit. I wanted to really bring him in because he knows so much and he's so smart. So, but I wanted to bring him in because I wanted to really talk about the liver and the weight loss because, you know, as I've shared a little bit of my journey, you know, you have to really pay attention. Weight loss just isn't just weight loss. It's really, you have to, it starts with, you know, the liver, because the liver is really basically everything in your body. But, you know, what you put in your body goes through your liver and out your body. So I just wanted him to enlighten us so that I could share with you.
Yes, you're right. Like most people don't think about the liver when they're thinking about weight loss, right? They're thinking about, you know, I've just got to eat really well. I've got to exercise, you know, maybe I'm thinking more about my muscles and things like that. But the liver is what allows your body to do two things, right? It's going to allow you to be able to take in all of that good nutrition that you're consuming and shuttle it to the right places. But then the second and the biggest thing that it does for weight loss is that when you are on whatever philosophy it is, okay, right? The essential thing in weight loss is you're trying to break down your existing fat stores, right? So when you break down your existing fat stores, they just don't kind of disappear. Like people think like, oh, okay, well, so there's this fat cell, right. You puncture the fat cell, all the fat comes out of the fat cell, all right? And then where does it go, right? Well, where all that fat goes, okay, right, is it goes into the bloodstream, right? Yeah. But the other thing that goes out in the bloodstream is all the fat-soluble toxins, and there's a lot of toxins that get embedded into fat. That's where toxins love to embed themselves into. They can't embed themselves into, you know, the blood or the muscle. They want to go to fat, okay, right? So then all of a sudden you essentially break down the fat. The fat then releases, but with that you release these toxins. Right. These toxins, they're fat soluble, right? So they have to be eliminated, but they need to become water soluble first. So how they become water soluble is they have to go through the liver. Right?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow. So then with the fat cells though, when you say that, you know, do they just shrink? Would you say? And then do they have memory? I feel like once the fat cells are there, that you have the memory.
Well, you don't. Well, that's interesting. So with fat cells, there's only 2 times for males, 3 times for females, in which you will be building your. I know. Women again, yes, even men. We get one more advantage, I guess. But is that you're going to be producing fat cells? Okay, right? And so once those are developed, they're there. Yeah. They don't go anywhere. Yeah. Okay, right? This is like the whole great concept of liposuction, right? Liposuction actually removes the fat cells. Mm-hmm. And so now if you are going to gain weight, meaning gain fat, it's going to have to be in existing fat cells. Right. So if those fat cells aren't there, then they don't eat, right? Yeah. Right? And so essentially, where the fat cells just become smaller, right? And but the number doesn't change, if you will. You know what I mean? Unless you do things to make that number change.
So what would you say? Which that is so awesome, because I don't think a lot of people understand like the importance of, you know, the liver and really like what it does. Because I think that, you know, like what you just said, we think, oh, we got to work out, we're gonna drink more water, not alcohol, and you know, we just got to eat less, which is not true if you've got a sluggish liver. Yeah,
if you've got an impaired liver, you're not going to be able to, one, release these toxins that are from fat properly, which will then cause you to have more inflammation, which then will cause you to actually gain weight as well too. And then secondly, you won't have the ability to break down the nutrition that you're consuming, okay, right? And the fats that you're consuming in a proper way. And then one of the things that, we consume a lot of is carbohydrates. And the liver has a huge function in making sure and shuttling where those sugars are going to go, right? Where that carbohydrate gets broken down into glucose, where that glucose is going to go. Is it going to go to cells? Is it going to go to your liver and your muscles? Or is it going to go to fat? So if you've got this impaired liver, then it's not going to properly shuttle the right amount of glucose or carbohydrates to the spaces, and you're going to end up with more of that being shuttled to fat.
That's so interesting.
It's crazy too, because it's like not many people know about supporting your liver, and they're trying so hard to lose weight, but they're not doing the things to support the liver. So even if they eat that salad trying to be good, they're not actually absorbing the nutrients, and it's like all kind of a lost cause, and then you're staying fat on top of it.
Yes.
And it's all the rest that comes along with it. Well, even like when I first started, I mean, you guys have been in this journey with us. I remember when I came to you and I was like, I just have to lose the weight. And you're like, well, we have to start with your gut and your liver. And I'm like, okay, that's helping me right now.
Right.
But he was right, because here now, we're a couple months in, and I've cleared my gut up, and I've started to lose weight and my liver.
Significantly. I mean, you're not just losing a little bit of weight, you're losing a lot of weight, but you're losing a lot of the weight in the right places too. Which is a bit different than when people try to lose weight and they don't have those other areas healed, and so then they end up losing, which is really muscle mass, and they start looking gaunt, they start feeling sick, they start maybe becoming from a big pear to a small pear, as they say, what I mean, right? Which is not the right way to get healthy, because you want to change body composition.
Well, it was really interesting, like you said about the muscles, because that was one of the things I have the high fast twitch fiber muscles. So I bulk up really quick, but this was not happening when I was going through all this, when he told me to clear my gut and my liver. But that was why, because now it makes more sense, because I was like, I don't understand, I'm working out and what's not happening. I'm not getting muscle. Is there just so much fat? What's happening? But it was really, it makes more sense to him, to what you just said, which is what I wanted to clarify with you guys, because I think that, again, when he told me that, I wanted to share this, because I was kind of like, really? Where am I going to go do that right now? Like, it's not, we want the quick fix. But obviously we didn't gain weight overnight, right? So, and I really think it's so important to share your knowledge on that, because I don't think we, as women or men, understand, because nobody talks about it. They don't talk about, you need to clear your liver. No, take this hydroxycut or these stupid pills that make you crazy, and then they're not, are the quick fixes.
Right, exactly. It's like, the healthiest person is always at the proper body composition. But the thin person doesn't necessarily need to be healthy. Right? And see, that's what we kind of get mixed up a little bit, is that we say, oh, this person, he looks like he or she looks thin, or she looks at the right weight, and such. But that doesn't have necessarily any true indication of how healthy that they could be, right? But the reverse isn't true. That's why it's like one of the best things that anybody can do to get to the right body composition, or get to the right weight, or whatever it is. And the reason why I say body composition is everybody's different, right? I mean, not everyone that is, 5'5" is 125 pounds, you know what I mean, right? With 80% body fat, or whatever, 80% muscle fat.
Wow.
No one should, but like 15% body fat, or 20% body fat, or whatever. That's not necessarily, those numbers don't necessarily mean that that's you, right? But here's how you do know that those numbers are accurate for you, is if you're doing all of the right healthy things for yourself. You know what I mean, right? And so for you to get rid of some of those foods that were healthy foods, but they weren't healthy for you, made a huge difference in your inflammation, in your metabolic processes, in your ability to be efficient with the energy that and because of that, you're now reshaping the body and you're getting to the right body composition, right? Well, the liver and the gut are, two huge factors for that, because you got to think about the gut as just being this kind of a hollow tube, okay, right? You've got a hollow tube that goes from your mouth all the way to your butt, okay, right? It's a hollow tube, okay, right? And so a lot of people, whatever you put in that hollow tube, that's not who you are, okay, right? That's not the foods. But what actually gets processed out of that hollow tube into the bloodstream is who you really are, okay, right? So what I'm saying is that when you're eating good foods, but it's not getting out of the hollow tube, you're not healthy.
Right.
Okay, right? But once it gets out of the hollow tube and it gets into the bloodstream, the next place that it goes to get cleansed is the liver.
Right.
And so if all of a sudden, you don't have a healthy liver or it's an impaired liver, then you're not going to get proper detoxification of those things that come out of that tube. And then you're going to get the inflammation and all that sort of stuff,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So, what would you say? Now I know that but I want to hear your take on it too, because there's so many ways that they say to detox the liver. They've got the medical medium where he talks about, you need to eat glucose first in the morning because your body needs that. For me, I've found that it doesn't work for me because I have Hashimoto's and my body's already got glucose in it. I have high glucose anyways. But, I do know that, one of the great things to detox the liver is sweating, like working out, get your lymphatic system, right?
Yep.
And then drinking water and electrolytes.
Yep.
What else would you say?
So I think that the liver is the only organ that's a regenerative organ, right? Like we've talked about that before. So there's no other organ in the body that has the ability to repair itself to such a degree that it can reform itself, if you will. You know what I mean, right? That's a pretty amazing thing. And so the important point about that is, well, one, obviously the fact is wow, if all of a sudden that is the only organ that actually has the ability to repair itself and regenerate itself in that manner, imagine how incredibly important that organ must be to the body, okay? Right? Like you can't have it, right? And so that should make someone think oh, wow, that I should really think about the liver or whatever. But then the second thing is that the care of the liver is, I'm not a big fan of, these are things you can do for your heart. These are the things that you can do for your kidney. These are the things that you can do for your liver. I mean, your body is kind of this magical in a way that it has all of the ability to deal with any type of stress and trauma that it's going to face. I mean, think about how many we are the strongest, most resilient, most whatever of our species, if you will. That's how we arrived at this space, okay, right? And so think about all of the things that we've had to deal with since now, and our body's been able to evolve to do, okay, right? So therefore, it's got those things. The number one thing that you can do for detoxification is just to give your body a break. Yeah. Right?
And what do you mean by that?
And so for the liver, what things can you do so that it has to do less detoxification? Okay, right? And so if its role is to detox, then what can you do what can you consume so that it doesn't need to detox so much, which then gives it rest, which then allows it to recover, and then it's able to, that's how I think of detoxification, if that's even the word, right? It's like with the gut, a lot of people do things to, help to detoxify the gut or to heal the gut or whatever. And yeah, no question, I think that there's awesome things that you can do to feed the gut because it has those, but really the number one thing you could do is stop beating up the gut. So you would
especially you take a break from
What's that?
What are the things you should take a break
from? Oh, great. So I mean, the things that are toxic or need greater detoxification are things that are like processed foods, right? You don't want to hamper the liver by, adding a lot of sugars and carbohydrates to the system, you know what I mean, right? These are kind of, pretty simple things, the alcohol that you talk about, right? I mean, the foods that are, a lot of times like the gluten-based foods and the dairy, these are things, though, if you think about it, they talk about these foods for all sorts of the body, if you will, right? But they really are, it's a universal thing for the liver, for the kidneys, for the spleen. I mean, you've got 3 organs there that are for detoxification. You have the kidneys, you have the liver, you have the spleen, okay, right? And they all kind of have different roles, right? But they are there to help to detoxify the system. Well, when you do it for one organ, you're doing it for the entire system, right?
And so, like, when we were talking about carbohydrates, I don't think we think about that either, right? Like, I think that we think when we're eating carbs, we don't really realize that it's just as bad as eating sugar. Yeah. On some of them, right? Like breads and chips and stuff. They're just like eating a sugar. Would you agree? Or?
Yeah. Yes. So I mean, remember, there's three macronutrients, right? There's proteins, carbs, and fats, right? And each of them, they break down into their individual units, right? So protein breaks down into the individual unit of an amino acid. A fat breaks down into the individual unit of a essential fatty acid, right? And then the carbohydrate gets broken down into glucose, which is sugar, okay, right? And so whether that is a white piece of bread, okay, right, that's going to quickly break down into that glucose, or whether it's a very kind of, highly dense fibrous bread, it's going to break down into sugar as well too. It's just that there's that fiber element that's in there.
Slow it down.
It completely helps slow it down. Yeah. And that's the big thing, is that it's not that the body does not need carbohydrates, or that carbohydrates is something that is detrimental to the body. What's detrimental to the body is the amount and the pace in which you consume those things, because it doesn't have the ability to kind of, the processors don't work that fast, right? And when the processors don't work that fast, 2 things end up happening. Either one, you break the processor, or secondly, you then cause the processor to say, well, you know what? I'm not going to deal with this right now, so I'll just store this and process this. And while this is getting stored, you're adding more into the system, so then this never gets processed, so then that ends up just that storage gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So essentially, when you're consuming, the link between the liver and the and carbohydrates is, as you consume more carbohydrates, your body, your pancreas is going to say, okay, well, wait a second, you're consuming carbohydrates, that means you're consuming sugars, so I'm going to shoot off insulin to help to protect your blood vessels, because I don't want that sugar to stay into that bloodstream. But then what the liver does is the liver says, okay, well, if they're consuming carbohydrates and there's going to be sugar in the bloodstream, then I better make sure that I protect those blood vessels by creating cholesterol.
There's the,
right?
There's the other one, the important one is the cholesterol.
And so the liver creates the cholesterol. So it creates the LDL, it creates the HDL. And it's in response to the fact that there are carbohydrates coming into the system, and that it needs to protect those blood vessels by using that cholesterol to protect that lining, right? And so when individuals have, high cholesterol, and they're, worried about eating foods that have high cholesterol, that's not the issue, because consuming high cholesterol doesn't create higher blood cholesterol. Okay, right? There's no research that's said that. Okay,
they'll
right?
say, oh, we can't eat eggs.
I can't eat eggs.
High cholesterol. I can't eat bacon. I have high cholesterol.
Yes, exactly. And where you have to think about is, but where's the root? How is cholesterol being made? oh, cholesterol is being made because the pancreas is shooting off insulin. That triggers an enzyme in the liver to produce the cholesterol. Okay, well then wait a second. If that's the root, then I got to stop triggering the insulin. How do I stop triggering the insulin? Stop consuming so much carbohydrates. If you lower the amount of sugar and carbohydrates you consume, you lower the mechanism to produce the cholesterol.
That's interesting. So then what about the low cholesterol? Because I know that they say one of the things is the silent killer is the low cholesterol, or I'm sorry, high cholesterol.
High cholesterol,
Like they say
yeah.
you should start there.
Yeah.
But what's the difference between the low and the high?
I don't
with the
know
liver?
too many people that have low, some people have low HDL.
I have cholesterol. That's
Yeah. How low is your low?
I don't know. It's pretty low.
Yeah,
Where they're
okay.
like eat bacon and they want me to do weird stuff. But
Yeah, gotcha. Well, I mean, here's the thing, okay, right? You've got LDL and you've got HDL. Most people would have oftentimes low HDL. Oftentimes that's a genetic condition. I have low HDL. Doesn't mean that it's actually low. It just means that it is low for the mass population.
Right.
You know what I mean, right? And then LDL. A lot of people will have high LDL, but oftentimes there's two types of LDL. There's large particle LDL and small particle LDL, okay, right? And really the issue isn't the fact that you have low or high cholesterol.
Right.
The issue is whether that cholesterol is oxidized cholesterol. And if you have oxidized cholesterol, now you've got an issue because that is the free radical that's causing all of the damage, right? And so there's never been any link between low or high cholesterol and heart disease. You know what I mean, right? So that's why there's that, all those books about the cholesterol myth, right? And the fact that, why would you be taking statins, to lower cholesterol when number one, isn't a link, and then number two, statins also will hinder or obstruct the pathway to produce another nutrient called CoQ10, which is important for the heart, right? Yes. And so that's the biggest issue when people start screwing around with levels of that sort of stuff.
That makes sense, but it all starts at the liver.
Yeah, right.
That's so interesting. Okay, so then what would you say, what would be a good sign that, somebody's in trouble with their liver? You know what I mean? Like, what would you say?
Yeah, I think that, one of the things is that, you've done all of these things, you're eating really well, you're, exercise, you're doing all that, but you're eating all the right foods, but for some reason you're not losing weight, you know what I mean, right? That could be a simple thing. Someone could just simply press on their under their right rib cage, that's where the liver is. You could literally feel your liver. I don't know, literally feel, but I mean, you could press
liver.
the liver. Yeah. If it's inflamed or whatever, but the thing is that from a medical standpoint, obviously you would have high liver enzymes, because something's going on. That's what something's going on in the body, so therefore you would have high liver enzymes, right? Because the liver's having to work overtime. You know what I mean, right? So it's those are the things that that's why it's really tough to kind of figure out what the health of your liver is, because oftentimes, some people feel like I do, disease and illness starts and ends at the liver, meaning that, think about it, if your body had all of the ability to detoxify, now do remember reasonably you're eating well and things like that, okay, right? And you have some sort of health issue, right? It may very well be due to the fact that you're not detoxifying these things that you're consuming, right? And so you might want to look there. That's why we were talking about, the Gerson therapy and how the Gerson therapy really focuses on, okay, if we're going to beat cancer, but even though they talk about cancer, the Gerson therapy is something that, people go for all sorts of health issues, right? And they'll first let's heal the liver. And then once we heal the liver, we'll then deal with everything else.
Well, that makes sense. That's good. So what would you say that, What would you say that you, what would you
got the pool guy out there. Yeah.
Are you trying to open it?
You could just go.
Yeah, go the other way, yeah. What would you say would be good to, like, I know that milk thistle, like everybody, like every doctor that I've talked to, and most books say, you know, for good liver health, you know, milk thistle. Like just something that's because like I know that when my doctor used to put me on DIM, which is like a liver detoxifier, but it made me like a jerk. Like it made me like angry, like, you know.
Oh, gotcha.
So like and some people that they react that way, but when the milk thistle is actually, you know, such a easy way to gently, like every day kind of detox the liver. What would you say else would be, you know, would be supportive?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think a lot of like everyone always talks about milk thistle as something that is really healthy. No, it is. I'm sure. There is. I mean, a lot of these Ayurvedic kind of herbal kind of philosophies are really big. A lot of these medicinal mushrooms have been shown to be beneficial, like the reishi mushroom and the lion's mane and such, you know. I think that, you know, shiitake hasn't been as much. Yeah, that's
we
not.
cook with them.
Yeah, you cook with them.
Mushrooms.
But yeah, and so I'm not really big on some of these ones that they've got going on.
What would you do?
No, like I said, I mean, you get the best. You can take all the milk thistle that you want. You know, it's not going to beat out the fact that you're resting the liver, and you're resting the liver by not consuming things that it has to process. Right. You know, right? And you've got a regenerative organ there that obviously, if it's regenerative, it has the ability to rebuild itself. But nothing gets a chance to rebuild itself unless it gets rest.
No,
you know
you're
what I mean,
right.
right?
Yeah, they even said that at school. Like, you know, if you give your body half the chance, it'll repair itself.
Right.
Which you're right, yeah.
And like, I mean, a lot of times, you know, they'll use a lot of antioxidants, vitamin A, beta carotene, vitamin C is a really big one, and things like that. And it's, why are they using antioxidants as something to help the liver? Is because what do antioxidants do? They neutralize free radicals. They're antioxidants, right? And so what it's basically saying is it's saying, okay, when you consume something that is an oxidant or is a free radical, what we'll do is we will then neutralize it so the liver has to do less work, right? And so that's why you'll notice a lot of liver cleanses are very, they're juice-based, right? And the juices are oftentimes green-based juices, right? Well, the reason for that is because there's a lot of the carotenoids, you know, beta carotenes and the other types of carotenoids that are shown to be very antioxidant rich.
Yeah.
Well, the concept is you're just giving the liver a break. It has to do less work. You know, now it only has to do 70% of the work rather than 100%.
Right, rather than the food that you didn't really chew, and
right.
It has to break everything down. Yeah.
So you're giving it a break and doing, you know, that side, but is it still helpful to like take the herbs to aid in the support? Is it
completely
just a little extra?
Yeah, for sure.
Not as a band-aid.
Yeah.
Like,
no, but
I'll eat the cake
support.
and then take dandelion.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
But
Yeah,
I think
no.
what you were saying was the less is more, because any pills that we take too, it has to process. Is that what you're
completely?
What
Yeah.
you're saying?
Yeah,
That's what you're saying, yeah.
like everything has to go.
It's when he
through
kind
there,
of
you know?
giggled when I said that, because he was basically, I just told you.
I know it's not cheap, but what about dandelion?
Oh, I just said that, but no.
I just said no big deal.
No, those things are super supportive, though. You know what I mean, right? Like it is. It's just that, you know, those things are obviously going to be less toxic than, or toxin rich, if you will, than the other things that you're taking in. But I think that, you know, people just, I think it really comes from a lot of my angst or whatever, just comes from the fact that, you know, people think that detoxing is, well, one, like you mentioned, it's kind of I'll do all of this sort of stuff, and don't worry, I'll just do this 5-day cleanse, or I'll do this 6-day cleanse, or whatever, you know. And it's also marketed that way, you know what I mean, right? Like it's marketed as a hangover cure type of thing or whatever. And then also people think that, that detoxifying allows them to have just a clean slate, right?
Yeah.
Because that's more of what they can conceptualize. Like, okay, so if I detoxify, that means I'm like cleaning off this table. I got it all clean, and now I'm ready for a new.
Time for Vegas.
Exactly. Right, exactly.
No, it's true. Yeah.
And it just doesn't
But then
work
you're just
like
starting
that.
over, right?
Yeah, it doesn't work like that. I mean, and oftentimes the true detoxification that's happening, like at these places, like I was talking about, like the Gerson therapy or these, right? That's like aggressive detoxification, right? That's
Right.
like that's over not days, but that's weeks and months,
Yeah.
right? And it is very precise, right? And it's very kind of, calculated in the
Yeah.
sense of like, a lot of people, here's a great point. When you detox, a lot of detoxes are sold as these juice cleanses,
Yeah.
okay, right? And there's not a lot of protein
No,
oftentimes,
it's
okay,
not
right?
sugar.
Well, here's the thing is that, remember I was telling you about that fat, okay, right? And that fat breaks down. When that fat breaks down, it releases those fat-soluble toxins. Those fat-soluble toxins go into the liver. Now, here's the interesting thing. When it goes into the liver, it comes out as a metabolite. And that metabolite is oftentimes 100 times more toxic than the original toxin.
Wow.
And the reason for that is it's a process, okay, right? There's a whole process. Now, that toxin, right, has to become water soluble because it's still fat soluble. If it's water soluble, now it can be removed from sweat, urine, all that sort of stuff, okay, right? Well, for it to become water soluble, it needs to attach itself to amino acids, which is protein.
Right.
So what if you're doing these detoxes and there's no protein?
Right.
So where's this highly volatile and highly metabolite going? It's just now floating. It's worse than
That's right,
when
yeah.
you broke it. You're in a worse situation than when you had it stored in fat, because at least when it was stored in fat, it was protected to a certain degree.
Right. No, that makes sense. Because I've always wanted like the juice cleanses, and I, knowing like, once you juice, like once they've done, the extraction, it only it's like only potent for so many.
Oh, right. A
So
lot of
then
people.
all these juice cleanses have been sitting in these bottles, and for days, and they're going to give it to you, and it's all sugar.
Right.
And I'm not downing on anybody, because I love a lot of people that have all of these juice shops.
Yeah.
But I just, it's interesting.
Well, you got to realize. I mean, think about it. As soon as you start
It's so funny.
breaking that down,
Yeah.
as soon as you start taking away the fiber coating
Right.
of any plant, fruit or vegetable, it now is exposed to air, it's exposed to heat, it's exposed to light,
Yes.
and to air, right. And those are the three elements that causes oxidation. So now it's going to start breaking down those nutrients and
Yeah.
those enzymes, okay, right? So, now if you take that all the way to the point where it's just the juice, right? You're just leaving it more vulnerable, if you will,
Right.
right? And so, yeah, you got to be careful, like I had a friend the other day, she was juicing, and she says, oh, I juice, and then I'll make it for a couple days, And I'm like, well, gosh, you make it for a couple days, like that's just becoming more and more rancid a lot quicker as the hours go by, right? And so it's not necessarily how you in those places that I'm talking about, they don't juice. They're making the juice and then you're drinking it. You're making the juice and then you're drinking it.
Right. Yeah, but no, it's true, because and those juicers are a real pain in the rear end to clean. So I get why she wanted to do it for a couple days.
Yeah,
Holy
totally.
crap! Like she probably didn't want to clean her 500 parts for that juicer.
Right.
Every single day.
Right.
Yeah.
But in reality, that's why do it if you're not going to do it the right way?
Sure.
It's like making the good food and then microwaving it.
Yeah.
Forget it.
Yeah. Maybe sometimes it's better than nothing, or this
I
or
know,
that.
I
and all that
know,
sort of
I
stuff.
know.
But I don't know.
I don't know if it's better than nothing. Is it? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Well, I guess if it's sitting there for 3 days, it would be worse
Sugar.
than nothing because
I might as well eat
well, it's all
Skittles.
going to be sugar. It's all going to be sugar. The issue isn't that it's sugar. The issue is that the fact of that you've just the whole reason why you're juicing is because you're trying to concentrate as much nutrients into something that can be taken quickly and then passively absorbed into the system. Well, if those nutrients are not there, and then worse, there's actually some free radical stress that's in there, then yeah, you now have better than nothing.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Do we think we covered everything? Oh, what do you had food for the liver? What's good foods for the liver?
Well, I think like we were talking about,
Yeah.
what are those things that are wholesome, great foods that don't have a lot of burden on the liver, right? And one of those things is we talked about sugar, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got there's only a certain amount of food groups,
Right.
you've got meats, you've got vegetables, you've got
Right.
fruits, you've got nuts, you've got beans, you've got, these are the only foods that are out there, okay, right? There's not 500 food groups, you know what I mean?
Right.
There's only, okay, right? And so now you're saying, okay, so what are the food groups that I'm going to consume? These are all whole foods, they're all
Right.
natural
They
foods.
need to
They're-
come out of the ground.
they come out of the
Simplify it.
ground. Well, yeah, but I mean, do remember they're just whole foods that are clean foods that don't. You could eat meat that has a lot of growth hormones and
I know,
antibiotics and things like that the liver is going to deal with.
Yeah.
Or you could eat meat that doesn't have a lot of those things.
And then
So
it's
the-
not as hard on the liver.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like
you're just-
bison.
Uh,
Bison's not really, because they can't add any hormones to it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
A good tip that I like is when you shop in the outer perimeter of the store, because once you start going in, that's when you start getting processed foods, candy, ice cream, packaged stuff. So the outer perimeter
Yeah.
is always the whole foods.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Exactly. All
It's a
right.
good tip.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we got it right.
Good, yeah.
All right.
That's great. Now
I
you know all about the liver.
Yeah.
Nourish your
and
liver
what
and
is
love
the
yourself.
point? Ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Thanks, buddy.
You bet.